There is no truth in Christianity whatsoever. It's all mythology. It's deliberate deception. It's propaganda. Wartime propaganda at that. Most Christians don't even know that the Romans were actively engaged in multiple significant wars in the late first and early second century. And this is the reason Christianity exists. Because Christianity is the replacement religion for Judaism created by the Romans after the war. That's all it is. Jesus is a fictional character. So you don't get to go to heaven for believing in Jesus. This is why they say you have to believe in Jesus or you'll be tortured for all eternity, is because this is what the Romans were telling the Jews. If they didn't believe that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah, then they would suffer an eternal punishment, which would be their death in war. It's very simple. I was Christian over 40 years. I've studied the Bible extensively. I know the Christian narrative. I know the Christian apologetics. And all of it is a waste of your time and everybody's time. All right, moving to the next guest. Jacob, what's up?
Oh, man, it's been a minute.
Have we talked before?
Yeah, it's been probably about a year now.
All right.
I haven't been on TikTok in a while. I was just going to ask you, so historically, if you wanted to, move off the emotional stuff or any of that, towards the historicity of Christ.
Yeah.
What is so just to be clear, because I have my pen and paper here, I'm going to make notes. What is the clear allegation and timeline that Christianity was created? Or the idea?
The very first Christian writing known to history is, and we don't actually have it, we only have references to it, is Marcion's Gospel of the Lord and the 6 letters of Paul. That there is no evidence of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John prior to 144 CE, and we get this information from Irenaeus, who was writing in the end of the 2nd century, about 180. So there is no evidence that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, or any of the letters of Paul existed in the 1st century. Even though scholars will date the Gospels to the end of the 1st century and some of the letters of Paul to the 50s and 60s, that's pure assumption. There is no evidence that supports their claims. And the very first piece of evidence is Marcion of Sinope. And so the book to read, which I haven't read yet, I need to get it because I think it's
before Jesus.
Huh?
What, the Christ before Jesus?
No, I've read that one.
Well, I was like, that's what's going wild. That's what most of these claims rely on. But yeah, go ahead.
So the book I'm talking about is by Jason Badun, the First New Testament.
Jason Badun.
Jason Badun is a biblical scholar or historian or something.
How do you spell that last name?
Bedoun, I think. Jason Badun, the First New Testament.
All right.
So the First New Testament, and Nina Livesay is a biblical scholar who's recently written an extremely expensive textbook, I think, for biblical scholars. So it's not for the common people; it's only for people that are going to school for seminary. Mm-hmm. But she's saying what I agree with, that Paul never existed, and that the letters of Paul first showed up in Marcion's library in 144. So the very first actual evidence we have of any Christian writing at all is Marcion in 144. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were most likely written after 144.
So, all right. So that's a few things. So 140. Well, I'm going to put it on the chart here at 144. This is the claim that Christianity does not predate 144. There's no evidence. There's no historical context. There's nothing like that, is what you're claiming.
So,
I just want to be clear so I'm not putting words in your mouth.
So almost. So that's almost what I'm saying, because so let me give you a timeline. So you want a timeline.
Yeah, I do this for I have a 6,000 year timeline, and this particular place is very contested in history. So I'm trying to get everybody's view on this.
So here's how I understand the 1st and 2nd century timeline. Uh, Prior to 70 CE, there was absolutely nothing whatsoever Christian. Jesus did not exist. Nobody who lived or wrote prior to 70 ever even heard of Jesus Christ because he was not a known character at that time. I believe that some of the stories about Jesus could have started being told or developed after 70 CE because we have so many references in the Bible to the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple that this was a well-known significant event from the biblical perspective. So, Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, Jesus says the temple's going to be destroyed. And Paul says all throughout all of his letters, he talks about the wrath of God coming on the Jews, the great day of wrath. Well, that day of wrath that was coming only for the Jews was the Roman Empire actively destroying the Jews in the Roman Empire. So on that timeline, so no Christianity, no Jesus prior to 70. No Paul prior to 70. After 70, maybe some of the stories were starting to develop, but we don't have any evidence of it. It's just an assumption that people started telling stories about, creating this new Jewish Messiah that would just die on a cross. But Marcion's the first one to actually produce any literature on it. So there were 3 major wars between the Romans and the Jews, and most Christians don't even know this. That the first Roman-Jewish war started in 66 and ended in 73, and in the year 70, we have the total annihilation of destruction of the Jewish temple and the conquering of the city of Jerusalem. This is documented by Josephus, an eyewitness to the events, written immediately after the events. So even though there's mythology mixed in with Josephus, that's about as credible as you can get, an eyewitness writing shortly after the events. So then for the rest of the first century, there's not a lot of, you've got the Flavian dynasty, you've got Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. They're the Caesars, the Roman Caesars. They, it's a dad and 2 sons. They finish out the first century, and they could have played a role in the creation of the Christian narrative, but it wasn't formalized yet in literature.
Who was those that you said? Those 3?
Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian.
Titus and Domitian.
Yep. Titus and Domitian were brothers. Titus was the older brother. Domitian was the younger brother. And Domitian actually built the Arch of Titus to honor his brother, who was his dead brother, who was the Caesar before him. And it's still in Rome today. And it says, dedicated to God Titus. It says divine, but we would say God. Divine Titus, the son of divine Vespasian. So on the Arch of Titus, it has emblems of the Jewish temple, the menorah and some other emblems of the Jewish temple, because after they destroyed the temple, they took the emblems of the Jewish temple back to Rome, and they had a victory parade through the streets of Rome, and they carved this parade into the Arch of Titus, and it's still there today. You can look at it online. It's in commemoration of the destruction of Jerusalem and the Jewish temple, and it's honoring the Son of God, Titus. You see, Jesus was supposed to be the Son of God, and Jesus said in the Bible that he was going to return in the clouds with his Father's mighty angels to reward the Jews for their works. Well, that happened, and the Son of God who came and destroyed Jerusalem was Titus, not Jesus. Titus was the one who did it. It's commemorated on the Arch of Titus. But that we can dig down there, but this is extremely significant for the creation of Christianity, is the destruction of Jerusalem and the Jewish temple.
Correct. So so you would say there's no Jewish literature even from the first century that negates Christianity, or if there is, what would you say to that?
Well, there's no Jewish literature from the first century at all. It doesn't exist because anything that they wrote was destroyed. Even the Jewish Talmud that wasn't even written until like 500 years later.
Yeah, not Talmud, not Talmud. I'm talking about, let's say, because again, let's roll with this idea. There's new people saying this guy Christ or whatever. There's new religions starting. You, I'm asking, you don't think the Jews at this time, or you're not aware of any refutations to the identity of Christ had appeared?
So the Jews were actively trying to preserve their own lives and their own culture, their own city, and their own religion. Uh, and they lost the war. So anything that the Jews would have said or written while they were in a losing battle with the Roman Empire, it doesn't exist. We don't have it. There's nothing. So they don't corroborate or deny anything because their history is ashes.
Well, there's allegedly, documents that trace the temple rabbis and what they did with their documents. They didn't just get obliterated and become nothing. Like there were still people left over.
They were banned from Israel after the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135, and they were only allowed to come back to visit on the Day of Atonement, 1 day a year for 1,000 years. So the Jews were eradicated from Israel for 1,000 years.
Right, I'm not disagreeing, but even Josephus, being a Jewish scholar, right, was not too far after these events that then can record history. So it's like they weren't all eradicated. Some still held positions. Maybe some who are like, they said they were Jews, but they went along with what the Romans said. They were allowed to hold position. Is that an incredulous idea?
Well, so how you're defining Jew is important because Hellenized Jews, like Josephus, which I'm not convinced Josephus was actually, he claims to have been a general in the Jewish army. And then, everybody in his cohort unalived themselves in a cave, but he was the only one that came out alive. This is a highly suspicious story. And the fact that he is a Flavian, which means he was adopted by the Caesars, the Flavian dynasty. I believe he was actually a Roman all along, and he claimed to be a Jew. Now, he does seem to have some understanding of the Jewish culture. But Philo of Alexandria was also a Hellenized Jew who lived prior to this in the early 1st century. And he was also a Hellenized Jew who wrote Greek. He didn't write Hebrew, he wrote Greek. And he called Plato the most holy Plato. So he was Hellenized, which means his mind was more Greek than Hebrew or Jewish. So a lot of people claim to be Jewish, but they're actually Greek.
True. That's true, but I'm just asking even from the perspective of this, so you're having to come up with a whole, conspiracy theory to say that Josephus was possibly not even Jewish because of the assertion that Romans completely annihilated every Hebrew that existed over there.
No, I'm not saying that every Hebrew died. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they were utterly defeated in war and they were kicked out of their land. And that's true. That's a fact.
I don't disagree with you on that. There's no point of contention.
I'm not saying that every single person was unalived, because a lot of them were allowed to live and a lot of them escaped and a lot of them ran away, but they were kicked out of Israel and they were prohibited from coming back. And the Romans did build a new city called Aelia Capitolina on top of Old Jerusalem, and it became a Roman city, completely Roman in every way. It's a Roman city after the destruction of Jerusalem in the 1st century.
Right. And this would lead even into more questions, but we're still in 1st century. We could go to more evidences, but so give me the consensus again. This is a Roman, on the screen it says a Roman wartime propaganda. So you're asserting that the Romans went along with this new version of a sect of Judaism, even though it pissed off and enraged the Hebrews who did not believe in Christ. This would somehow unite them all 300 years later. This was their idea. They were going to plan this out for a few hundred years and get it fine-tuned.
No. So that's your understanding is not what I'm saying. So I don't believe that there were never Christianity. It was wartime propaganda. The entire period from 66 to 135. That's 34 plus 35 is almost 70 years. So it's 69 years, but let's just say 70 years. From 66 to 135. There were 3 major wars in 70 years between the Romans and the Jews. This is indisputable fact. It's not opinion.
Got it. So from what'd you say, from 70 until what date?
From 66 to 135.
Okay, we'll put it 66 right here.
66 to 135. There were 3 major Roman Jewish wars.
Okay, and then what's the assertion based off of that?
There's no relevancy at all to Christianity in any of that. That was just a conflict between the Romans and the Jews, primarily because the Jews did not want to accept the Roman authority over them. They didn't want to pay taxes to Rome. They didn't want to be oppressed by Rome. They thought that God would send them a victorious military Messiah who would lead them in military victory against. So what motivated the rebellion? The Romans actually would have been fine with the Jews being whoever they wanted to be, as long as they would have just paid their taxes and kissed the feet of Caesar. If Caesar says do something, you got to do it. If they were going to rebel, they had to get destroyed. And so they were an obstinate people who were motivated by their religion.
Right, and so are we asserting that the Hebrew people were such a dominant force that the Rome was forced to react to their crazy religion or something?
So Rome, Rome appointed the king of the Jews. So Herod the Great was appointed by Rome. In the Bible, in Matthew, it says Jesus was born during the reign of Herod the Great. Herod the Great was not even a Jew, but he was appointed as the king of the Jews by the Romans because the Romans already possessed Israel in the biblical narrative. In the New Testament biblical narrative, Rome had total control of Israel. And in history, in Josephus's history, we have evidence that Rome was doing things to assert their authority over Israel, but Israel did not like that, such as there was a procurator named Gessius Flores, and this is actually what started the war in 66. The Jews were not paying all the taxes that the Romans thought they should. So Gessius Flores, who was a Roman governor, went inside the Jewish temple and he took from their treasury whatever he wanted to take. And this actually started the war. So in 66, while Nero was Caesar in Rome, Nero started the war with the Jews in 66 because he thought he had authority to go in the Jewish temple and take their money whenever he wanted, but the Jews did not like it. So it's not like the Jews were such a prominent people that the Romans felt like they had to do something. The Romans knew that they were more powerful than Israel by a long shot, and they were asserting their dominance by going in their temple and taking their money, and it just sparked a rebellion. So the Jewish people thought that they had God on their side. They didn't, but they thought they did. And so they said, God's on our side. It doesn't matter how powerful Rome is. God is more powerful. So they actually provoked the nation to go to war with Rome, and they were utterly defeated. Their God never showed up. So that's what really happened in history.
I'm not disagreeing with maybe those beliefs that the Hebrews thought God would show up and do those things. But again, I'm still asking the question, if Rome deals with the Hebrews, let's say in the first century by 135, they've completely, utterly, done it, like they've shown them who the boss is. They put the foot down, right? Why did it take them 200 more years to finally enact this idea of Christianity to unite everybody who was left over?
It didn't. So Christianity did not start as the state religion. It became the state religion for completely different reasons in the 4th century. But right now we're in the 2nd century. So in the 2nd century, there were many gods in the Roman Empire, and the Romans were polytheistic. They didn't care which god you served. as long as you paid your taxes and were not rebellious against Rome. And so I saw somebody in the comments say, geeked, get to the point, why did Rome create Jesus? So here I'm getting straight to the point. Why did Rome create Jesus? Rome created Jesus because the Jews rebelled against Rome and sparked these multiple rebellions based on their ideology that their God would send a Messiah to lead them in military victory over Rome. Rome found out that that's what motivated their rebellion, so they created an alternate story with an alternate Jewish Messiah who came and said, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to submit to those who have authority over you, and that if you will just accept your punishment now, you'll get rewarded after you die. So that's why Rome created Jesus, to create a new Jewish Messiah that was not a military Messiah, but was just a humble, servant, obedient, dead guy.
So after the rebellion was squashed, they invented a new guy and said, hey guys, don't you remember how this happened? Like they just invented a piece of history and then told people to
Exactly.
remember it? Oh, yeah. Gotcha. And then it took them 200 years before they finally enacted it as like the official state religion.
So
like
yes,
longer than America has been around, it took this plan to come together finally. Or not longer than, but almost, 2/3.
Because Christianity, they didn't create it overnight. It was in fact, most of the second century, for the entire, from 100 to 200, this is the origin of Christianity. It took them 100 years to create the religion.
So it's like the longest running conspiracy theory in history.
Probably so, yeah.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. So, what is your refutation to like the desecration of Hadrian? Like, what was that all about?
What do you mean?
Like, why did he concrete over the alleged holy sites of the Christians? Like, if the Christians didn't exist yet, or if they were just now making up this religion, right? Why did he concrete over the alleged site of Golgotha, where Christ was crucified, and the alleged burial site where he was buried? We know this is true because under Constantine, 100 years later, or almost a century later, he dug this crap back up so that Christians, and believers could go and pay homage at these sites. Did they just like create this big conspiracy and be like, in 200 years we'll like dig this crap up and then everybody will believe it?
So who told the story? I've never even heard that story. I haven't studied it. I'd have to study it. About Hadrian,
the desecration. Look up the desecration of Hadrian and type in like the tomb of the Holy Sepulchre, like what people say that is today and how long it has existed.
All right, so I'll have to look into that, but I'm not familiar with that right now. But what we have is we have letters, we have a history of Hadrian, and so he didn't talk about Christianity, so there is no historical evidence at the time that that Christianity existed. All we have from that time frame, from 66 to 135, is we have Roman Jewish wars. We do not have any Christian. Now, here's what we do have. We have a one-liner in Tacitus, Suetonius, and Pliny the Younger that makes a mention of Christianity, but not to Jesus, because none of them use the word Jesus. They said there was a man named Chrestus, and so this is what Tacitus says. It's a little one-liner that could have easily been inserted later, because the earliest manuscript we have of Tacitus is 1,000 years past the original writing. So I know most scholars say, well, this is probably authentic, and it might be authentic, but it doesn't really prove anything. It doesn't prove Christianity existed. It's just making a claim that, well, so even at the very least, I would say Tacitus would just be talking about, assuming that it's authentic, Tacitus would just be saying there are people that believe in this guy who was crucified by Pontius Pilate. That doesn't mean that there was a guy crucified by Pontius Pilate. So it's not a testimony that Jesus existed. It's only a testimony that Christians believe in Jesus. But that would be in the early 2nd century. And there are a lot of problems with that, with Tacitus's one-liner. He even follows it up and says that this was a mischievous superstition. That's why scholars say that they think it's authentic. It wasn't added by a Christian because it's saying that it's nonsense. Christianity is nonsense, but there are people that believe lies. So it's certainly, I don't think it was added by a Christian because it's actually a testimony against Christianity, but it's only a one-liner. It's not like he gave an elaborate story. Nobody gave an elaborate story about Christianity in the first or second century. I mean, you've got Christians creating the story in the second century. You don't have unbiased historical records or non-Christian historical records that describe the existence of Christianity. And we have no evidence that any New Testament book was written in the first century. No evidence that any New Testament book, the Gospels, the letters of Paul, the letters of Peter and John, we have no credible evidence that any of them existed in the first century.
So sufficient evidence would be like you're thinking that if like Jesus was real and the disciples were real and people walked around, that they should have written this down and like publicized it, put it in the bookstores and like spread it all around Rome, and Rome would have been like, yeah, guys, you guys should believe this.
Nope. So the only reference that Josephus made to Jesus is something that is clearly a forgery. So it was not original to Josephus. The Testimonium Flavianum is absolutely unreliable. There is only people who want to believe in Christianity think that there's any validity to the Testimonium Flavianum. So if Josephus would have written about Paul and Jesus, even if he wasn't a Christian, if he said, hey, there was this guy named Paul going around spreading Christianity, starting churches all over the place based on the belief that some man resurrected from the dead, and I don't think that man did resurrect from the dead, but there's these religions and churches starting all over the Roman Empire, and these people believe that a man resurrected from the dead. If Josephus had said something like that, then I'd say, you know what? That Christianity probably did start prior to Josephus's writing, because he tells us an unbiased historical record about Paul starting churches based on the belief that a man resurrected from the dead. He doesn't do that. So when you take the Testimonium Flavianum out of Josephus, he says absolutely nothing about Jesus or Christianity in all of his writings. And he's writing about the first century history of Jerusalem. And he doesn't mention Jesus or Paul. So to me, this is extremely critical that Josephus was completely unaware of Christianity and Paul. And so most likely it didn't even exist yet. And the motivation, the only purpose that Christianity serves is to give an alternate Jewish narrative. It's to change the Jewish narrative, because the Jews were revolting, believing in a military Messiah to save them in war. And so Christianity only serves the purpose of the Romans after the war to tell the Jews that no, your idea of a military Messiah to overthrow Rome is completely unacceptable. You must believe in the peaceful Messiah who died on the cross, and you're responsible for his death. So it's a slap in the face to the Jews, telling them that this is the only Messiah they're allowed to believe in because they lost the war, and that they're responsible for the death of their own Messiah. It's a slap in the face. It's an insult. This is why Jews reject Christianity, because the Jews did not create Christianity. The Romans did after the war.
So when again, it's like the narrative, unless you're going for like the unification idea under like them paying taxes alone, like that's why Rome would have done it. But then still the timing, why don't we see in Roman history that the Romans talked about this idea and did these things? We only see the evidence leading up to the conversion of Rome or the Roman emperor into allegedly Christianity. Why don't we see the Romans founding this and talking about how great it is and all these different ideas? We just see them accepting it 300 years later, or creating a version of it. But
So,
before this, there was opposition to it. Clearly,
what you're saying now, I think, is why don't we have evidence that the Romans admitted to creating Christianity as wartime propaganda? Is that what you're saying? Why didn't they admit that they lied and created an alternate Jewish narrative?
no, not even if they admit that they lied. Why don't they have a better story? Why, if the Gospels have so many holes in it and it's so contradictory, were they just that bad at coming up with stories?
Yeah. So some people say, it's a masterful work of art. There's no way that this could not be true because it's so well written. It is not well written at all. It's an absolute dumpster fire. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is a dumpster fire. They can't get any story straight, but you know why? Because they were the Roman Empire. They didn't have to get their story straight. They ruled with an iron fist. You either believe it or you die.
But
So
Jeff,
you
think
don't
about it.
question
It's like me and you are coming up with a religion to trick all these crazy Hebrews into believing it. And we're sitting down writing stuff, and we're going to knowingly contradict ourselves or come up with conflicting versions.
So they were not trying to trick the Jews into believing it. They were demanding either
That's
believe
the
it or
whole
die.
allegation. Yeah, exactly. You either believe this, join the faith, or be unalived. Like,
Right.
it has to be believable in some form. That's what the
But no, it
assertion just
doesn't.
said. You just said, why would they admit that they tricked everybody or that they're creating a conspiracy? So it had to be convincing, but yet when
No,
they go to
it
make it
doesn't.
work, it's unconvincing.
So, I mean, apparently it's convincing enough because there's billions of Christians even today. So it was convincing enough. But when you're in the Roman Empire, and I mean, the signs are all throughout the New Testament. I mean, 1 Peter 2:13 says, honor the emperor as supreme authority.
So
Romans
what?
13:1
Okay,
says,
what historical evidence would you say that you could show that Romans forced Christianity onto people before the 3rd century, or before the 4th century?
so they didn't before the 3rd century, before the 4th century. They didn't.
And
It
that's
was
not
just
interesting.
so listen, it makes perfect sense. In the 2nd century, after the Jews were destroyed in war, they simply created a propaganda campaign that says this is the new Jewish narrative that we will allow in the Roman Empire. They're not trying to take over the whole Roman Empire. They're not trying to consolidate the whole Roman Empire under Christianity. They're simply saying Judaism, as it was practiced before, is unacceptable. And so if anybody wants to be a Jew, the only kind of Jew you can be is a Christian kind of Jew that believes that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. So it was an ultimatum for anybody in the whole Roman Empire that old-time Judaism was eradicated and replaced by Christianity. This is why all of Paul's letters, say old Judaism has passed away. That stuff was the old covenant. Now we're in the new covenant, and he's incorporated the Roman Gentiles, and I'm writing letters to the beloved Rome, Christians in Rome. So it was just to change the Jewish narrative at first. And under Constantine, the Roman Empire was falling apart. And so consolidating under one religion was his last-ditch effort to try to consolidate power, so that because the Eastern or the Western Roman Empire had already fallen, and he had to move to Constantinople and start the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire was falling apart. So he was trying to consolidate it so it would be easier to manage. And Christianity actually incorporates most of the pagan religions that were in the Roman Empire anyway.
Yeah, post 300 it does, and that's I think this is again something that I would ask you. Why was the Roman Empire falling apart, by the way, for those 300 years? Like,
They overextended.
And that's the only reason.
Well, there was probably multiple reasons. I mean, empire. The fall of the empire is a complicated matter, but they were overextended.
Well, no, you said it a while ago. You said it truthfully. Is that the evidence shows clearly that either A, what you're saying is true and holds some weight, or the reverse is true. Something happened. They kept trying to unalive all the Hebrews who have these conflicting viewpoints, and then the Hebrews were either handled in the 130s, like after the wars were over, and they were told, believe this new thing, right? And then for 200 years, they're, I guess, coming up with their own versions of it, to where then finally in the 300s, Constantine holds the Council of Nicaea, to where we can debate about what we actually believe in, because our ancestors, being the Romans who made up this religion, were so bad at coming up with it, we got to come up with these new versions of it.
So the reason Constantine assembled the Council of Nicaea is because up until this point, there were huge varieties of beliefs that had developed out of this, new religion that was created. And so he was
Which
asserting
indicates
Roman
that
authority
people
to
had
consolidate the doctrines.
Well, does this not, at least, I mean, for you just to be honest towards history, that this shows, at least by the 300s, there were varying views about who the man Christ was, if this was a real story, if what you're saying is true, if what other people, I mean, you know the story, there's like 20 different versions of what Christianity was. So I think it's apparent that after this event allegedly happened, there are various conflicting stories on what the truth was. And then it spreads all the way to the 300s until the Roman Empire finally says, here's the story, here's what we're going to believe. Actually, we're going to make a book, and then we're going to put all this stuff together. We're going to mix our religion in with it, and here's what everybody can believe. That's what we see happen. But
no, we have evidence that the books were being written prior to the 4th century. So we have 2nd century evidence. We have quotations. Now,
well, I meant compiled as a book, like the
right.
Bible.
So they started compiling these books and establishing canon. Not even in the 4th century. I think it was more like the 5th century before we got the canon established. It wasn't that a lot of people think the Council of Nicaea established biblical canon, but it didn't. The Council of Nicaea was primarily to establish the divinity of Jesus. That's the primary purpose for the Council of Nicaea.
That was not the express. It was to clearly define some conflicting ideas about the divinity of Jesus, because you have many people at the time that were claiming different things again about the story. Was he Jesus? I mean, was he God the Father? Was he God the Son and not the Father and not the Spirit? Was he a 20-foot angel and wasn't even physical? Was he this? Was he that? There's various conflicting stories. And we know this because Tertullian writes against Praxis, which means Praxis was preaching and talking about some things. We just don't have his writings. I mean, it's very interesting. Praxis had come out against the early, but well before the Trinitarian doctrine landed, saying that Jesus was the Father, as the scriptures state. He was God in the flesh, and that the Montanists
don't state that Jesus is the Father.
Well, we could argue semantics on that later, but regardless, this is what Praxis was arguing, and the official church doctrine said no, that he is the Son, he is, they're all three distinct persons. And Praxis also preached against the Montanists, these two prophetess women who were claiming to be possessed by the person of the Holy Spirit. Like Jesus was a person, Holy Spirit's a person, and the Father's a person. And they could on command be possessed by the Holy Spirit. Same thing people do today in some churches. Yeah. This has always been a debate. And Praxis was forced to recant according to history, but that's unknown if he actually did that or not. But this is evidence that people were arguing about this, and there was a hand that was trying to cover up everybody who disagreed.
So they're not arguing over what was true. They're arguing over the mythology. They had different versions of mythology, and they were trying to get their story straight. And so that's what the Council of Nicaea was about, was to quit arguing over the mythology, and we will have an official declaration from the Caesar himself, who says this is the official doctrine. So quit fighting and arguing about mythology. Not a single person in the 4th century would have any authority to speak on whether Jesus was God or not. They weren't alive. They didn't see him. They're only referencing literature.
I agree with you on that. Like I would say that the church tradition, which the scriptures tell you, the traditions of men he hates, is that if you ask anybody who believes in the Bible and the Protestant version of the Trinity, they're going to tell you God is three persons. He's three people in one being, and that's not what Scripture teaches. And this has been an argument since Christ lived and allegedly was taken into heaven.
But the Scripture is mythology, so this is the reason. The reason all Christians fight and argue about everything is because it's not a holy book. It's not true. It's just mythology and philosophy, and you can interpret them, obviously, 40,000 plus different ways.
Well, it's because things like this, Jeff. Do you believe that when truth is spoken, that it divides the crowd?
Um, well, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So if I said right now that you and I are speaking on TikTok, that is a truth statement, and it
Right.
wouldn't divide anybody. Everybody would agree. Every single person here would agree that you and I are speaking on TikTok. So the truth does not always divide.
Well, I'm not talking about instances like that. I'm talking about divisive truths. If I said the sky is blue and you said it was yellow, this would cause a division, correct?
But if the sky is blue and you're saying the sky is blue, then that's not causing the division. What's causing the division is my lie that the sky is yellow.
Amen. It's that your belief. It's like because I said the sky's blue doesn't make the sky blue. Because you believe what I said about the sky doesn't make it any more blue. Because you say it's yellow doesn't change the fact that it's blue. So when truth is spoken, does it alter the truth and divide the people who are listening to it? If they're not aware of it, let's say we haven't discovered microscopes yet, and I'm telling you that germs, I think germs exist, these little bitty microscopic, I don't even know what a microscope is, these little things you can't even see, and I'm telling you I believe they exist, right? And you tell me you don't believe they exist. Does that change the fact that the germs are still there?
No,
No, it doesn't. Me believing in them, did that make them spawn magically?
no.
No, it doesn't. Truth divides those that believe and disbelieve it. And that's what I'll say at that. We all have a version of what we believe about history, and this is where we're stand. I think that you take a very strong biased position against Christianity, and it's clear.
So my position on Christianity is based on 40 plus years of study and life experience. So it's not a biased view against Christianity because I lived 40 plus years as a Christian.
How would that not make you biased? You are from the position inside of it saying that from my personal experience, that is, I don't know. How else you
So
would
it
say
is an objective, it is an objectively true statement that no Christian can demonstrate the effectiveness of prayer today, right now. If you're a Christian, I could say unequivocally that with absolute objective truth, you cannot pray to Jesus or whoever you pray to and whatever name you pray in, that you cannot demonstrate that God or Jesus can hear or respond to your prayers right now. That is an objective truth that we could demonstrate right now.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to disagree and say that I could just magically pull up God for you. That's not what I see in scriptures telling me I should do either. So
I can show you where it says it in scriptures.
I know the verses you're pulling up, Jeff.
Right.
We've been through that.
Right.
But the point is, you would have to discount the thousands of stories of people who claim to say from their personal experience, they have experienced something. So by your personal bias, they're all liars.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. You would have to stand there and be
Jacob,
able to make that
by
claim.
every Christian's bias, they think every single Muslim is a liar.
Right. I mean, obviously, that's what I was saying about the divisive truth.
So, no.
Jesus-
Just because people disagree doesn't mean that you have the truth. In fact, I mean, if two people disagree, you can say that it's not possible that both of them have the truth, because if they have different viewpoints, it's not possible that opposing viewpoints can both be true. But it's possible one could have the truth, but it's also possible that both could be wrong.
That's correct.
So,
I mean, that's no argument from me there. Like, obviously Christians are claiming to know the truth because they say they know Jesus. He says he was the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. We're not claiming to have some higher knowledge or divine revelation. We're saying we believe our ancestors who say they saw this, and that we trust that this story is true.
Well, and I would say that's foolish because I can prove that it's not true.
Well, you've kind of failed to do that in the last hour.
So the things that we've been talking about so far is the lack of evidence for Christianity in the first century, and the only thing you can do to refute me is to provide some actual evidence from the first century, and I don't think you can. So the second century is where Christianity was developing, And it was not developing as what it became in the 4th century. It was developing as post-Jewish war propaganda. They were changing the Jewish narrative. And there were a group of people that, in fact, religion is a powerful tool that governments use to control the minds of people. And when you have a group of people like the Jews that were revolting and rebelling as a result of their religion, they were obligated to change that ideology. And Christianity effectively serves the purpose of changing the Jewish ideology and replacing it with something that was pro-Roman. Pay your taxes and submit to the government. That's what Christianity teaches. And accept your beatings. Slaves, obey your masters. This supported the Roman agenda to control the Jews. So it served its purpose. And in the 4th century, there was a different reason.
That logic, it flies in the face of logic, really, because you're saying they invented a new thing that goes completely against things Jews believed, but yet this thing united them all, so they would pay taxes.
Christianity did not unite Judaism.
So why did Romans try to convince them to convert to it in the 3rd century?
They didn't try to convince them. They demanded that you believe it or die. It was an ultimatum. Judaism, in fact, let me read it right here from the Bible. I mean, I think Colossians 2 is a good place, I think. So let's see. I mean, let's just look at this one. Colossians 2, verse 20. This is Christianity. Since you died with Christ to the elemental spiritual forces of this world. This is actually those words. I've done Greek word studies on these things, and it's actually talking about Judaism. It's talking about the laws that they had, and it's going to become apparent in context. So you have died to Judaism is what it's saying, but you've died with Christ to the elemental, fundamental, spiritual forces of this world, the Jewish world. You died to your old ways. Why, as though still belonging to the world, do you submit to its rules? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. These are all references to the Jewish law. Why are you still regarding the Jewish law as anything of value? These rules, which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use, talking about whether you can eat pigs or not, whether you can touch dead bodies or not, these things are all about physical things. We, Greeks, are more concerned about the spiritual cleanliness, not the physical cleanliness, are based on merely human commands and teachings. So it's specifically saying here in Colossians 2 that these rules that you Jews have to not touch and taste, to eat things that are kosher and not unclean, he says these are only human commands. They didn't even come from God. The Jewish law did not come from God, according to Christianity. It is human commands.
Not what that says, Jeff.
It is what it says. It says your Jewish law only is human commands. That's Colossians 2:22. 2:22, Colossians.
So read it again and then make the claim again.
These rules, and I'm saying these rules are talking about the Jewish laws, the Jewish rules. The whole everything Paul's saying is that Jewish law is no longer applicable. And so the context of this is talking about the Jewish law. Do not taste, do not touch, do not handle. And he says these rules, Colossians 2:22, these rules, the Jewish law, which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use, are based on merely human commands and teachings.
Okay, so that's not saying though that the source is so you're saying he's talking to the Hebrews. I agree with you. But when he says it's a doctrine of men, you're asserting that he's saying it's a random doctrine of men and not the doctrine given by Moses on the mountain where all of them believe, all of this, where it came from.
Paul is saying in all of his letters that
the law of Moses,
God has updated Judaism. God has came to me, Paul, and told me that all that old stuff that you guys have been reading in your Hebrew scriptures, That's all outdated. That's all. That was just that stuff's not valid anymore.
No, he's not. That's not just Paul, brother. And like we could get on to, doctrinal beliefs or whatever if you wanted to do that, but as far as history goes, and if you want to go in, what did the Jews think God would look like? Does God have a soul? Does he have a spirit? Does he have a body? I would like to know your answer on those. From the Hebrew perspective, did God have a appearance? Did he have a physical appearance? Did he have a soul from the Hebrew reading?
No, God could not be seen from the Hebrew perspective. He was not a person. He was not a
Hold on.
man
So why couldn't he be seen? Let's go to that verse.
because he was too glorious and he would melt your eyeballs out.
That's okay.
If you saw God, in fact, Moses says, "Let me see you," and God says, "No, you can't see me because I'm too wonderful for you. But here's what I'll do: I'll put you in the cleft of the rock, and I'll place my hand over you, and I will pass by, and you can see my butt crack as I'm walking away." You can see. He says, "You can see my back, not my butt crack." He says, "You can see my back as I'm going away because my back's not too glorious, but my face is."
Bro, I love your recounts. So from that, did God have a physical appearance?
From that story, he would have some sort of visible appearance.
Right. I think so. In Isaiah 9:6, he says, "Then said I, woe is me, for I am undone, because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." And this is when he's having a vision, seeing God, seeing the seraphim angels cover the throne of God. Isaiah saw God. Moses saw God. Elijah saw God. Many people in the Old Testament allegedly saw God. But then we have a verse that says, well, nobody can see the face of God, or they'll have their eyes burned out, like you said.
And so what that is so
So you have to come up with an explanation of interpretation of why those weren't physical events. This is what most Hebrew or Judaic scholars would do. This is how I can interpret it for you. Let me tell you what this means, instead of reading for what the text says. The text is clear.
the text is mythology and philosophy, though. So, and it's also inconsistent.
Well, again, being clear, if we were to if you could even accept this understanding, that if I were to tell you, you see my face right here on TikTok, you see my little picture on the thing or whatever, but you don't see truly who I am. You don't know my family, my background, my children, my life story, who I am, what I think about. So you can see my face, but you cannot see my face. And that's the truth of what is taught all throughout the ancient scriptures, is that God, who is invisible, who cannot be seen, but yet appeared all throughout the scriptures to his people, does seem to have a form, does seem to have a way for us to communicate with him, and wants to do that.
So, in literature, sure. So people could talk to God back then, but in reality, we can't talk to God. We can't see God. It's only in a book. Like it seems like you're actually taking the position that something is true just because it's written in the Bible. You think something's true?
No, that's not the position I'm taking. Here's one I'll give you, and I'll ask you this question: that in the biblical account of what a man is or what a human being is, and there's many other cultures that have their own version of this, but we could talk about those too. It talks about man being formed from the dust of the earth, and then God breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, and he became a living soul. 3 elements: body, matter. You have the breath, the stuff that is the ruach is what it's called. It's the life-giving force, the chi, the ki, the different words in different cultures. It's this life-sustaining force all over the world. And then the soul, the nefesh, that's something different. He become a soul. So I say, if God, according to the scriptures, made man in his image, man has a body, a spirit, and a soul, then this would be the image me as an ancient Hebrew would have of the living God. But I was told, don't make images of me. Don't make them with stone and copper and clay and brass like your brethren do, your cousins from these other tribes, because I am a living God and I will visit you one day. That's the story that's told.
Oh, okay. So you recognize it's a story then. It's a story. It's not true. It's just a story.
Well, the story of George Washington chopping down a cherry tree, is that true? Like all of his story is based on accounts from our ancestors.
But, George Washington very well could have cut down a cherry tree because that's not a supernatural claim. I believe it's a story that didn't actually happen because I believe we have evidence that it was based on somebody saying, "Oh, he's so." I think I'm getting an Honest Abe, Abraham Lincoln story mixed up in there. Oh, Honest Abe,
Good though,
but
but you just understand what I'm saying. History is subjective to the like to the viewer. Like we don't know exactly what has happened. Everything we know is given to us by our ancestors. Like only in the last few hundred years have you had all of these major claims about how the histories of the earth have been changed and lied about, and see this manipulation here, and Jesus wasn't real, he wasn't even a person. Like this is not even a logical argument like 1,000 years ago.
because yeah, people didn't have the information that we have today. People didn't have the education that we have today. People didn't know what we know today. So back then, you could tell somebody, "Oh, God created the earth in 6 days," and they would have no reason to even doubt it. They just believe it. But we have a lot more education and knowledge and information today that says that this is not even remotely possible.
Well, again, there's two ways to look at the data. There's a lot of data that conflicts with the age of the earth idea. So it's like, what do you believe?
There's,
You
there's
obviously,
no data. There's no data whatsoever that says the earth is only 6,000 years old.
there's data that disproves it's millions of years old,
Like
or
what?
at least would conflict with the story that it's millions of years old.
So,
Let me give you one primitive example. When did we discover that dinosaurs were existing?
um,
I mean, what, I think it was around 200 years ago or something, the word dinosaur was created. I'm asking, when did we start digging up these ancient creatures?
what's your
That
point?
any of them, I don't care. When did
So,
humans
do you
start
believe that
digging them up?
dinosaurs were buried in Noah's flood? Is that what you're getting at?
No, that's not what I'm getting at. I'm asking, when did humans discover the phenomenon or the idea that millions of years ago dinosaurs walked on the earth, and that humans and dinosaurs did not walk together, or the thing that we call dinosaurs did not walk with man?
I don't know, but what's your point? Get to your point.
Well, I'm just asking if you're aware of this kind of thing.
I
So,
believe that dinosaurs are evidence that the Earth is way older than 6,000 years. The fossils and that we have of dinosaurs, and not just dinosaurs, but all fossils that we have, are evidence. We've got even human fossils that date farther than 6,000 years.
so if we found ancient writings and iconography and things of that nature that depict ancient humans with dinosaurs, and we just dug them up in the 1800s, and they didn't exist for hundreds of millions of years before that, could you make that make sense for me?
So, so for one, uh, we can have movies today of people riding on dragons. So just because you have a painting of, even assuming that they just imagined really big creatures because they told scary stories about big creatures or something, uh, then then that would be one possible explanation why somebody could paint something that looks like a dinosaur.
So
Uh,
let's go with that allegation. They just painted something that looked like a dinosaur. They got lucky. Cultures around the globe that never saw these creatures drew them luckily.
so, is it your claim that that dinosaurs existed? What, 3, 4, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, that dinosaurs existed, that they weren't
My,
extinct yet?
my claim is I don't know the truth of history, that something isn't adding up, that I observe and see things that do not match up with the conventional dating of the earth. So it raises questions.
Well, but I think that if you spend just a little bit of time looking at the dinosaur fossil record and how they're dating these and how where they're finding them, and there's actually some layer, I forget, it's in the geologic column. There's some
If you're
layer.
going to appeal to layers, there's another glaring problem. How do we find human artifacts in allegedly multi-million-year-old sediment? How does that make sense?
So I think you haven't done much study on
I think I
geology.
have. I have a spreadsheet of artifacts that are anomalies from history that they just say they just get buried. Nobody talks about them. They don't make the mainstream, but they're found in layers of sediment and dirt that are jillions of years old. But then, oh, whoops, we found a little human artifact in here, so the
So,
story
do
gets
you
covered.
think that the Earth is only 6,000 years old?
I would say that according to the scriptures and according to the understanding that I have, that yes, that there is a very real reason to believe that. And I could ask you some questions to make you understand why.
Okay, well, that's for another day. But there was something. There's somewhere. Oh, here's where I wanted to go. So I can at least agree with you that it's unreasonable to expect us to know with certainty what happened in the ancient past. I don't care if you're talking about 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. I mean, even 200 years ago. We've got relatively good documentation from 200 years ago, but if if any god expected me to have an accurate understanding of what happened in America 200 years ago, I would say that that would be an unjust god to expect me to know what happened 200 years before I was born. So the fact that we know that history can be manipulated and confused, that would tell you that there is no way that Christianity could be true, because there is no way that a good God, a just God, could hold us accountable for believing in something that happened 2,000 years ago. It's completely unreasonable. So that argument alone defeats Christianity.
That because humans are bad, God isn't real.
You weren't listening.
Like that's
Uh,
what you're saying. Since humans can distort history, therefore God's not real.
Therefore, holding if God is holding me accountable to what happened 2,000 years ago, and I have overwhelming evidence of contradictions and inconsistencies and unreliable claims and false claims, then that would make God, if God exists and if God is holding me accountable for what happened 2,000 years ago, he is completely unjust and unworthy of praise. I'm not saying that means God doesn't exist. It would mean God is evil if he exists.
Because why? Because you're saying there's a certain level of knowledge that you would need to be equipped with when you're born, or to just have by default, or something.
So
To exist.
if God was going to hold me accountable to believing in Christianity, the only thing that he could do is provide evidence today, not expect me to believe ancient stories written by other people in different languages 2,000 years ago. It's completely unjust for God to expect me to believe the Bible. What he would have to do is he would have to instill Christians with the power to perform miracles today, so that when they could go to so that they would not get sick, so that they could pray and they could live forever, or whatever. They would have to have evidence, supernatural evidence, that God actually prefers that you believe in Jesus, that you pray in the name of Jesus, and that he will provide results when you
Right.
believe and pray in the name of Jesus. Then he could hold me accountable. He
So,
doesn't.
so right now you're saying, like, today, if God did a miracle for you, then that's it. You would just believe it. All this history stuff, you would recant on it, and that would be that.
So if I could pray in the name of Jesus and I could heal people of cancer, and if I could go to hospitals, cancer wards, and I could go from room to room and say, in the name of Jesus,
Let's say that
he's given me authority to.
let's say that you had the cancer, you were healed, and that you had this testimony. The person did it, said they believed in God. That's the power that moved it. Now your grandchildren, they don't get to see that same thing. What does God need to do in that situation? Send them cancer too to be healed, or should they just trust their ancestor?
No. So that God should not expect you to trust your ancestors. No.
So
God has
they
an
not trust their
obligation
mother and
to
father,
reveal
like,
himself to each person.
well, do we not? But God sets the standard in the scriptures of honor your father and your mother, love them, and they should honor God and teach you about life. That's the system that was set, but people suck and don't do that. So it's not the system that's broken, because you would say the same thing. Teach people about life. Teach people about love.
Do you disagree with your parents about anything?
Yes, most certainly.
Okay, well then you just defeated your own argument.
But it doesn't mean I don't look to them for wisdom. I don't look to my elders
No,
for
no, no. What you're saying,
understanding and guidance
what
on
the
things that
reason
I
you
don't
brought that
know.
up, the reason you brought that up is because you were trying to say that we must respect our parents and believe whatever they tell us because that's what is established in the scriptures.
No, I'm
And
not saying we
believe your
must.
insight.
I was using your example or the example. If you had the cancer and then your son, like this is a real thing, this happened to you. But the person that is going to be hearing the story was not personally eyewitness account. I'm asking what threshold, how many times throughout history would God need to show up personally, each generation, every person, every time it happened? Is he a vending machine that we need to be able to call on any time and then be able to go and screw around and do sin whenever we feel like it? Like, what is the version of God that you believe should be real?
He should be consistent and reliable. And nobody should be expected to believe in him unless God demonstrates his existence to them. So, in other words, if God gives, let's say I have cancer, and somebody and you come visit me in the hospital, and you say, "In the name of Jesus, be healed of cancer," and instantaneously I feel better, I can breathe better, my lung cancer is gone. We get X-rays, and everything's perfect, spick and span, perfect lungs, no cancer. I was like, wow, that was definitely. I just got an X-ray yesterday, and I had cancer. I got one today, and I don't have cancer, and it's definitely due to this prayer. And then if I got released from the hospital, they're like, oh my goodness, this guy's healed. Then I say, you know what? I want to do the same for other people. It would be inappropriate for me to expect all these other people dying of cancer to believe in the God that I believe in if I can't also heal them in the name of the same God. So only I would have a reason to
I'm not
believe
gonna lie,
it.
Jeff, and say it would be a hard sell to convince them, but you would be a personal witness to say, yeah, there is somebody, this did happen, believe this, and I'm not saying it's gonna happen to you, but it could happen, that God works in all things, and that, you know the story. I'm not gonna sit here and preach, but again, it's like you're saying since it happened to you and you couldn't prove it, that you would just be quiet about it and hide your light under a bushel and not share it with the world.
That's not what I said at all, Jacob. Are you not listening to me?
You said it would be unfair to try to convince people to believe that.
It would
Even
be
though you are
unfair
a
to
living
expect them to believe
example.
it unless they listen. It would be unfair to expect them to believe that my God is real if they didn't also receive the healing.
Why would that, like, what do you mean it would be unfair? Like, how is that unfair? Because
Because
everybody needs to, so
because
you're
people
saying
lie.
everybody
Jacob.
needs to be treated equally for God
Yes.
to be real.
Yes. In order for God to hold people accountable to believing in him, God has an obligation to demonstrate his existence to them. Not because otherwise, Jacob, listen, this is important.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're not believing in Jesus, you're believing in me. You see, if you believe in my testimony, that's not Jesus you're believing in, you're believing in me. You should be believing in Jesus, and Jesus
Correct.
ought to show himself to them personally.
Well, if you're the messenger of that testimony, then that's what I would say that you would be
Yeah.
the believer
And,
of, obviously.
and so there are messengers of Islam as well. So how am I
Correct.
going to tell the difference between, well, this guy believes in Jesus, but this guy believes in Muhammad? So how am I going to tell the difference?
It's on each of us to look into the stories and especially the supernatural claims. I would say if you get to the point of even looking at the potential that they're, because I
So
know
we
that
should
you're
not just trust what
hardcore.
people tell us. So you're
No,
saying
no, we
we should
shouldn't
not
discuss
trust
what
what people
people.
tell us.
What do you mean? Why? When did I
You
say
shouldn't
that?
just blindly believe what people say.
No, you should not blindly believe it. Get a collection of, like, say, 100 samples and see the commonalities. Look
No,
at
no,
the
no.
different things people are saying.
So 100 samples. So there are 2 billion Muslims.
Okay, grab 100 from Muslims, 100 from Christians, 100 from Hebrews, 100
Okay.
different belief systems, different
Okay.
ideologies, and see if there are any common threads.
I've done that, and every single one of them have claims with no evidence. There is no evidence that any God, any supernatural being, does anything in reality. No matter if you believe in Allah or Yahweh or Jesus or Buddha, there is no evidence that any of them have any supernatural powers. They just have beliefs in mythology. That's the common thread that I see.
Well, some of these things, though, okay, without proof, and I'll get off after this because we've been going back and forth for a minute, but this is one thing that I would look at, and I don't know if you've heard of this story or not, but this is modern. A man, he was a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon, I think, maybe, I don't want to get it completely wrong. He was a
I
doctor.
think I know where you're going.
Is it Evan Alexander or Evan something? You know what I'm talking about? Or
I've
it's
heard of
Dr.
some
Evan
near-death
something.
experience from a neurosurgeon guy.
Okay, yes. He had like some kind of meningitis, I believe, but basically his brain function, the lights were turned off. Like, right, he's not supposed to have consciousness. And yet he experiences a conscious event after these things are going on. Then he comes back being recovered. That's one. And he was, this is not some fringe person just saying that he was not a believer before this, then comes back being a believer. So either A, he's, he had a good trip and just made up stuff in his head. This is what I'm saying. When you collect these samples and listen to these stories, you're going to see a bunch of common things that don't make sense to conventional what we're taught about the existence that we live in. But there's many questions that you could ask, for example, about consciousness. Where does it go? Like, what happens when the body stops ticking? Like, there's a lot of things right now in neuroscience claiming.
I can definitively answer that for you.
You can't. Are you a
I
top
can.
neurosurgeon?
I can. I don't have to be a neurosurgeon. I can
So what are the two
definitively answer the
competing
question.
theories right now on where does consciousness come from? What are the two competing
The
theories?
brain. So
What's the second competing theory?
that the brain is some receiver of some outside source of consciousness.
Well, or you could just say that consciousness is a fundamental part of nature, and like that.
And that's complete lunacy. It's ridiculous.
Why is that complete lunacy?
So I can prove to you, if you were here, I could prove to you. In fact, every single night when you go to sleep, you lose consciousness. When the moment you go to sleep, to the time you wake up, I mean, you may have a dream, you may not have a dream, but that period of time, you're completely unaware of, you're unconscious of your existence while you're sleeping. I could put you to sleep as well. I could put you in a chokehold, cut off the blood supply to your brain, and you will go to sleep and you will lose consciousness. So that is absolute proof that the brain is the source of consciousness.
No. The brain is the source of experiencing consciousness in this medium that we're in. Because I could give you a similar question, Jeff. Right now, looking at your body, looking at my body, we have the physical makeup, the atoms that we are, and then let me ask you this, the synapses and stuff that are firing off in your brain and your nervous system, the electrical component of your body, right? Is that's what you would say you are, right? You're emerging, you are those electrical signals coming out of the brain?
Yeah,
Right.
the combined makeup of my physiology makes up, and all my ideas and thoughts come from my brain.
So we have the hardware, which would be like the actual brain matter, the physical stuff. Then we have the electricity or the power that's keeping this thing moving. And then we have the person inside. If I asked you right now, Jeff, could you pull up your favorite memory of your daughter in your brain right now? Can you actively call on those chemicals and those light signals to actively retrieve that from that physical squishy hardware in your brain right now? And then if you can, I'm going to ask you the next question. How are you doing that?
The brain has the ability to store memories.
I agree, no doubt about it. Hardware's there. How are you accessing it consciously? How do you pull that memory out? How do you send that light signal in?
Through the nervous system.
That's the mechanical explanation for how it works. How are you sending the signal?
So I don't know, but one thing I can know for sure, if I'm dead, I sure can't do it.
Amen. You can't operate in this realm because there ain't nothing to move around anymore.
There's no evidence that there is another realm. There's no evidence that there's another realm.
This begs the question, what is even more if they cannot prove that consciousness emerges from the brain, which they can't.
We can.
Well, I would love, I've got my pen, I'll write it down. Give me some articles to read on that.
I will demonstrate it to you. I will choke you out, and you will lose consciousness.
Okay, Jeff. Are the memories stored in your brain? Are those the actual events that happened?
It's a memory of the events.
Thank you. Okay, when you lose consciousness or your access to your brain and the capacities that we have in the physical realm, does that mean that those things disappeared and never happened?
Of course
What?
not. No.
Exactly. So I would say that your consciousness would still carry those things, that you would still know those things, that it's not just the fact that you can access the brain where you have stored those things. Those things exist regardless of them being stored in your hardware or not.
That makes no sense.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so do you exist right now regardless if somebody writes the story about you?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. The events happened regardless of if your hardware, for example, if you and I, all three of us, experience the same event, which one is the truth event, the source event?
If we experience the same event, then we saw the true event.
Again, all three of our memories are held in that hardware in our mind. Are those memories that event? No, they're not. It's the event is separate than your hardware recollection, your memory that is stored. It is not that thing. Consciousness is able to actually retrieve those things actively, consciously.
You have a functioning brain. If you don't have a functioning brain, you cannot recall anything.
Amen. I'm not disagreeing with that. You can't.
So the brain is the
world.
only dependent thing for memories and consciousness. There
But
is
the
no
problem
other
is
thing.
when you have people who have brain injuries, which means the lights are turned off, the signals aren't firing anymore, but yet they experience some kind of conscious interaction. That should be physically impossible. Yet
No.
there's tons. Okay, explain how that
No,
can
the
happen.
brain, no.
Explain it.
Someone with a traumatic brain injury still has brain activity.
I'm talking brain
They
activity.
can still process messages. They can still process data that's stored in the brain.
Let's talk about spinal injuries. What
I
about
mean,
those?
let's look at dementia, for instance. So, dementia is interruption in the neural pathways, but these people, their short-term memory sucks, but their long-term memory is great. Same with Alzheimer's. So they resort back because their brain stored something that happened to them in their childhood. Their brain will bring it back up. So it is stored in their brain, and it's really not up to them when it comes out. It's just the neural pathways in the
So
brain.
different parts of the brain do different things, and there are parts of the brain that operate, your involuntary actions, or heartbeat and breathing and things like this. So even someone who has had a very traumatic brain injury, if they're parts of the brain that operate the heartbeat and the breathing, they can still be alive. Which a lot of times they're, medically assisted at this point. They may not be even breathing on their own. There may be a machine that's breathing for them. There could even be a machine that's making their heart beat. But we know, I don't know, but we as humanity and brain surgeons know that different parts of the brain have different functions. And based on what head injury you have, I've got somebody I see all the time on TikTok. I think her name is Sarah. She's a sweet lady who believes in God. I feel sorry for that part, but she's a sweet lady who had a car injury or car accident and head injury, and she used to be perfectly healthy. Now she couldn't used to walk at all immediately after it. She couldn't talk very well. She's been going through therapy, both physical therapy and verbal therapy. She's learned how to speak better. She's learned how to walk better. She's actually doing real good now. But that's all physical. There is nothing metaphysical about it. It's just a brain injury, and it's therapy to retrain yourself how to walk and talk.
Right. The hardware needs to repair. And that's what I'm saying. Like the memories. The lady was talking about Alzheimer's a while ago. So in Alzheimer's patients, are the memories gone, or are the connections to that memory hard to access? I'll just say it like that.
So it has to do with the physiology of the brain and the disconnections that are in the physical hardware, as you're saying, whether it's the nerves or the brain matter or whatever it is. That and we can prove definitively that that your conscious awareness is completely dependent on a healthy brain, because head injuries and just head injuries essentially proves that. itself. And I've seen people do open skull surgery where they're touching parts of the brain, and they ask this guy, can you count to 10? And he's like, and you touch another part, and he's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, so let me ask this question. Would you say that someone's lack of sophisticated consciousness, as in, let's say they have a brain injury, would make them less of like a person like you and I are?
Of course not.
Of me either. Of course not. Of course not. I would say that they're the same kind of person. They have a soul or a you. They have a body and they have a brain. But they are limited in their capacity to interact with the physical world because of the hardware that they have. It's nothing to do with the person of who they are, because you have people who have, different cases, who exhibit extreme intelligence, extreme awareness, consciousness that is above normal human level. So we have to ask these questions too. This is why I say get the anomalous factors, not just what everybody says, and look at those, because there are outliers that don't. There's no answer to these questions that is logical according to what we're told.
So, do you have any conscious awareness of your existence prior to when you were born?
Not that I can remember. No, I don't think there was any, because I don't think there's any memories that if that did happen. I don't go into those realms of like what was before. I don't know. I know that my memories and my association with this place is strictly because I have a brain and I have a body to move around in this medium, and I can access, I can learn, I can train myself to learn new things, and I can utilize this thing that I call a body, or that we call bodies. And you can also utilize the thing, religious people would call spirit. It's that energy inside of that whatever, the life-giving force, put whatever name you want to put on it. Any of us can do this to learn. You can actively, the person can tell the body, I want to learn something. I want to do this. And then you can train new pathways into that brain. You can do these things, not the brain. The brain doesn't autonomously do these things.
So you're kind of rambling right now. But the fact, and I appreciate your honesty, because I believe all honest people, or at least if you're not delusional, would say, I have no awareness of my existence prior to my birth. This is the rational conclusion that everyone should make. If I think I saw somebody saying that they were aware of their existence prior to birth, and I think that you're delusional. But based on your life experience, based on my life experience, based on 99% of all life experience, 100% of every conscious experience that we have all had, listen.
Oh, go ahead. I was like, go ahead.
Has been while we had a healthy brain.
Right.
There's not even 1%. There's not even 0.1% of your life where you experienced anything independent of a healthy brain. You have never experienced anything without a brain. So the rational conclusion is that based on 100% of our samples and billions and billions and billions of sample size, 100% of all of our conscious experiences only exist when we have a healthy brain. So to conclude that we can have an experience without a brain is irrational. It's based on nothing but philosophy and hopes. So unmute and see if you heard what I said.
Yeah, I mean, that's the samples that you're given, though, again, without looking at any outliers, we're looking at this from the perspective of everyone who is conscious
There
while
are no
we're in
outliers.
this state.
There are no
Yes, there
outliers.
are. There are many.
There has never been a testimony from anybody without a brain.
I'm not
who
saying
have
without a
brain
brain.
testimonies.
I'm saying who have a physical brain injury that should not present consciousness.
What do you mean? So I've got a personal example of this. I had an aunt who had a brain aneurysm, and she was in a coma and on life support. And I was at the hospital in the meeting with my uncle and mother and other family members, making the decision on whether or not to pull the plug because she had no brain activity. They scratched her foot, they scratched her hand, they opened her eyes, her pupils would not dilate. They scratched her feet, they hit her knees. She had no reflexes whatsoever. She was on a machine that was making her heart beat and her lungs breathe. They could keep her alive, but she had no response. She couldn't blink her eyes. Her pupils didn't dilate. She had no reflexes whatsoever. We made the decision that she was already dead, and we took her off of life support. So she was living. She had a brain, but it was not a healthy brain. She had a brain aneurysm. A blood vessel burst in her head and completely shut the lights off.
Right. The same thing happened with my wife's grandmother, and she laid in the hospital bed, and they made the same decision. And you know what's crazy is while they're standing there making the decision to pull the plug on her grandmother who has no brain activity, she's talking to her grandmother, telling her that she loves her and that she's, they're sorry, and tears are just pouring out of her grandma's eyes. Almost like somebody can hear it, but they can't do anything.
Huh?
If tears are pouring out of her grandmother's eyes, that means y'all pulled the plug too soon.
Well, I mean, the doctors are the ones that are the pros here. No brain activity.
I think you're lying about tears coming out of her eyes. I don't think that's
I'm not
true.
lying. I wouldn't that's my wife's grandmother, brother. Like I wouldn't lie about this. Okay.
I think you are lying.
Well, you can think all you want to. I'm not lying. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if she was conscious or not. Like I don't know what to tell
What
my wife
happened
on
right
that.
before the tears came out of her eyes?
They are the doctors, they had already been told that if she doesn't present activity in X amount of time, then they were going to have to make the choice. So my wife, her sister, their other family that her grandma did not have much family left at this point. And they went in and they were told to make the decision, so that my wife and her younger sister were telling their grandmother bye, they love her, they're sorry, they're holding her hand. And they said, the doctor told them that the tears coming out of her eyes are normal. This happens sometimes.
Yeah, well, that isn't actually true. That would be her body, her mind having an emotional response to what was going on around her. That's kind of sad.
So I believe, Jacob,
Yeah.
if it appeared, if y'all were waiting for grandma to have some signs of life, and then when you saw her start crying, that in a way that you perceived was a response to what she was hearing, that would be the sign you were looking for. And you would not pull the plug when you got the sign that she was not brain dead. If you chose to pull the plug after she responded to you, that means you murdered her.
Well,
Yeah.
not me. These are doctors, medical professionals, higher than you, Jeff, telling people, citizens out here, don't worry, we know what consciousness is. That's not consciousness. That's just a natural chemical reaction, an auto response.
Well, so maybe the doctors were, maybe she didn't have health insurance or something, and they said, let's just pull the plug. Nah, that's normal. She can't hear you guys. Don't think that that's real tears. So that's
and I'm telling you, it does happen, especially when there's a.
And if that was my grandma,
and just to say, this is
and
not
they told
unique to me and my family.
In response to my comments, then I would sue them for medical malpractice for pulling the plug on my living, brain healthy grandma.
And you know what they'll say, Jeff? Prove it. They'll say, prove that she was conscious. How are you going to do that, Jeff?
We're going to talk about whether or not people can cry when their loved ones are telling them bye. That is a sign of consciousness.
Right.
And what if it doesn't happen again after the first time? See, told you she wasn't conscious. This is not something you're going to win in a court battle. This is not something like that. This is not unique to me. Do a poll on this and ask your viewers, do they have anybody who's passed away that have been told or have brain issues and had to pull the plug? And were there any weird things that happened? This is not a unique case.
So what are we even arguing about here? Because I'm saying that your conscious experience is 100% tied to a healthy brain. You
Right,
don't
and I
seem to
would
be disagreeing
argue,
with that.
yes, I would argue that no, the brain and the electricity in there is we are experiencing consciousness through the body, but that is not the definition of consciousness.
What is the definition of consciousness?
I would just say an awareness of oneself, which does not have to include a body or a spirit or electricity, whatever you want to call it. It's
And does this
self-awareness.
prove a God?
I would say this begs the question that if there is self-awareness post-brain activity, that it would beg some major questions, yes.
So what is your evidence that there is conscious awareness without post-brain activity? You have no evidence of this. It is just a philosophy. It is a hope. It is a dream. There is no evidence for it.
So, again, we're going on to... I got to get off here in a minute anyways, but look, there's two fields in this belief system right now that consciousness emerges due to the chemical interactions and the actual building of the brain. That's when consciousness starts, is because we actually have a location to start storing memories. I and others claim that just because you have a storage device now to put memories in does not mean that you, the person, don't exist before those capabilities happen.
Yeah, so you're just saying you believe in fantasies and you have no reason for it. You just want to believe in it.
If that's what you want to hear, yeah. But anyway,
that's what I'm
it's
hearing.
been a good talk, Jeff. I got to get off here. My wife's like,
Look,
"What the heck you
Jacob,
doing?"
I do appreciate you. We had some good conversation. So come back some
Hey,
other
man.
time.
Heck yeah, man. You guys are super respectful. I appreciate the time.
Yep. See ya.
Bye, Jacob.